I think you have that imposter syndromes, and I lead in these areas where I haven't come through them through a professional route. And that's really the role once you're at the strategic director level. It's about how you support other experts as well.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of View from the Hill, the podcast from Tower Hill, where we speak to leaders within local government. Today joining me is Executive Director of Children's Services at Lincolnshire County Council, Heather Sandy. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for talking to me.
Appreciate it. First off, we do this with all our guests. It's an opportunity, I think, for our guests to tell their journey and, why is it they do what they do? How did they get into it? And I think there's a lot of stories out there from local government professionals which aren't told often. So, why don't we start with that? How is it that you sort of got into the world of local government? But even before that, what led you to that? And are there any sort of early life influences that might have taken you down that path?
Yeah, okay, thank you. So my family are all pretty much public sector work.
Right.
So my mum is a nurse, was a nurse, she's retired now. And my dad was a nurse and then a lecturer at university in nursing. And they were real advocates for public service and for serving communities. And so that was something that interested me from a very early age. And in fact, all of my siblings have also gone into public sector work. So that's something that's kind of been in our family for a long time. Also, I think I started off as a teacher, so I trained to be a teacher and qualified when I was 21 and went into primary school teaching. And one of my drivers around education is something that my dad used to say to me. So my dad is from quite a deprived area of Gateshead and was the only member of his family to do professional qualifications and go into the kind of field that he went into. And he always used to say how important education was, because education dictates your lifestyle and your life choices, because it dictates the kind of opportunities that open up to you. And I think what I learned from my dad's experience at school is not enough teachers really cared about children on that estate at that time. I hope that's changed now, but at that time, really deprived area, there was very low expectations. All of his brothers went into manual labour and worked really hard in that field, but there was no expectation that people from that area would be driven to go into other areas. So the fact that my dad ended up leading a nursing course and developing an international nursing exchange programme is a real credit to him, but inspired me to really think about how I could work in education and really make a difference for children and young people.
Amazing. So going from that sort of background, what was the first steps into career-wise, and what was it? Did you take any sort of did you take an academic route into the world of education, or was it through experience?
Yeah. So I went straight from A-levels, a very traditional route, onto teacher training at Leeds Beckett University. I qualified from Leeds and I moved to Lincolnshire. So I'd met my husband at university and he was from Lincolnshire. Both teachers, so we came to work in Lincolnshire. So I've actually worked in Lincolnshire from my very first working job, and actually for Lincolnshire County Council, because I worked in maintained schools.
Right.
So I think it's coming up to 26 years I've worked for Lincolnshire County Council now. And so I went into teaching and really enjoyed teaching. I worked in different areas within Lincolnshire. And then was given the opportunity to shadow leaders in different subjects, and then given the opportunity to step up and lead those subjects. I really enjoyed that kind of middle leadership role and having an influence on a subject across the school. That was really something I thoroughly enjoyed. And then when I moved to a new school, the head teacher there asked me to put forward for a programme where I would go and help in other schools. So part of my time kind of working with the local authority, supporting teachers who might need teaching development. And I really enjoyed that. It was really exciting to go into other schools and to be able to share knowledge and expertise and to be able to help other people to develop was something that I really enjoyed. I ended up then coming to work for the local authority on a secondment to lead some programmes within as a teaching and learning consultant and supporting other people. And ultimately, whilst I was doing that, that led to me being asked if I would go and lead a school that had got into difficulty. And I, I was quite overwhelmed by that. And I often say I was an accidental head teacher because that definitely wasn't the journey I was planning on going on. And so then I was put into the school to lead it at a point in its journey where it had been judged inadequate. And that was incredible, really. I found the team there to be really supportive. They really welcomed the investment in them, the development, engaged really well with the families and with the children. And we took that school through its Ofsted journey whilst in special measures in what at the time was, one of the fastest times to good. And that was just incredible to be a part of. And then I moved from there to another school, again, very close to me geographically, felt I was really making a difference within my own community. And whilst I was doing that, I was approached by the local authority to come and look at how they might redesign school improvement. And so as part of that, I got to know the local authority a little bit better. I got to understand what it is that they did. And really, as a head teacher, I didn't have a full understanding of what the local authority did. And so then I moved to the local authority to be Assistant Director for Education.
Right. Correct me if I'm wrong, is that jump from, working in the schools and the programme across a few to being an assistant director, is that a fair is that a fairly big jump? Just to give me context, to be honest, because from just to give you why I've asked that question is I've been in this for 2 years, and my exposure to it so far has been on the interim side for local government professionals, and typically going from, say, like a service manager role to an assistant director role takes a number of years when you've already started working within the local authority. So I just wonder how the jump from working in the schools to that assistant director post happened. Did it feel like a big jump? And what was that like?
So it's really interesting because I think in terms of number of staff and areas of responsibility, it probably was a jump.
Yeah.
But actually what's really different is as a head teacher, I was the decision maker.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't have to, I had a governing board who of course I worked with and who did make the decisions, but on the day-to-day running of the school, the buck stopped with me. I was responsible for those decisions and I got to take those decisions. So coming back into a structure where actually I had a manager was a really different experience. So it is a jump, but also that moving away from having autonomy to make decisions with your own governing body to being part of a machine that has a director above you, a chief exec above you, was a really different experience. And for me, really reassuring, given the wideness of the scope I had taken on, actually having those kind of structures around the support with that was really important and something that I really valued. And I was really lucky because I came and worked for a director of children's services who had a lot of experience, is really well regarded, is kind, is empowering. And I think that was something that I really valued and have continued to value while I've worked in Lincolnshire, because she's continued to be my manager throughout that time.
Yeah, from our perspective, where in those councils where they have that emphasis on development and, a long-term vision for who's gonna lead it later, that they tend to be the more stable ones, especially from a recruitment perspective. How long is it that you spent doing that? Was getting to Director of Children's Services always in your mind, or was it something that just came naturally after doing the AD role for a while?
Yeah, again, no, it wasn't in my mind, and certainly not at that point. I really enjoyed the AD role, really enjoyed working with schools, working with the teams within the council. It was a job I thoroughly enjoyed. And what happened within Lincolnshire is quite quickly, the director had to act up as the chief exec because of circumstances within the council. And that meant we had to move into an acting arrangement for the DCS. And I was asked to do that alongside a colleague, and I did that. And actually we did that for a year whilst the chief executive position was recruited to permanently. And I found I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed working in that way, having that increased scope. Really enjoyed the connectivity with other DCSs across the region. I felt really well supported. And so basically the DCS, who was acting as chief exec, then secured that permanent role. So when the DCS job in Lincolnshire came up, I applied for it. And that was, not something I was planning.
Right.
But certainly it's a really rewarding job and one which I've thoroughly enjoyed.
Brilliant.
And I've been doing it for 5 years now, 1 year interim and coming up for 4 years permanently. So
The next question I wanted to ask was regarding the DCS role itself. Stepping up to that, I think most people are prepared across the board because they should typically come through either a social care route, an education background, or another one which could be slightly different. Yours was the education route. So did you feel confident with all the other aspects of leadership within the role? And how was it learning about it?
Yeah, so it was a steep learning curve, I think it's fair to say. And definitely, I think you have that imposter syndrome. So I think you have that kind of, can I do this? And can I lead in these areas where I haven't come through them through a professional route? And I think that was something I thought long and hard about. Now, I was lucky because I had the acting up year with a colleague who was from a social care background. I was able to really expose myself to some of the leadership that's needed within there. Right. And I was able to reassure myself that it isn't about me having the technical knowledge of doing a social care assessment. That's absolutely not my background. But it's about me being able to create the environment in which my teams and which the teams across Lincolnshire can thrive and can do what they need to do. So I think I definitely had areas where I knew I wanted to develop my understanding. I'd actually been through quite a steep learning curve in the acting up arrangements around health visiting and around children's public health nursing. And that had been really useful. And we'd been inspected by CQC in that time. And it had allowed me to get to understand those services a lot better and what I could do as a leader to support those services to deliver their professional services. And I think that made me more confident around social care. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because across our region in the East Midlands, for example, we've got DCSs from lots of different backgrounds, and that leads to really rich discussion. And it also means that some of the areas that I really worry about are not areas they worry about, and I can talk to them about that and I can get some reassurance about that. But equally, some of the things that they worry about, as an ex-head teacher, that's not the worry for me. Yeah. So I think that being able to share that expertise regionally. And what I would say within Lincolnshire is I am really fortunate that my senior team are well established. They've been in post for a long time. We have good succession planning. And actually, they are the experts, and I don't try and assume that expert role. That's not my job. Right. I make sure I can support my assistant directors and the heads of service as much as I possibly can to thrive in their roles. And I listen when that's not happening, and then we look at what we can do collectively together. And that's really the role. Once you're at the strategic director level, it's about how you support other experts as well to and you listen. And it's a lot of listening, it's a lot of leading into areas that you don't know so well. And so I always say when we have kind of proposals come through our leadership team, I ask a lot more questions on the ones I'm less familiar with, because that's about me understanding them and understanding the kind of unintended consequences. And I think that can be really helpful because a different perspective sometimes is really useful.
Right. This is a question that we've asked everyone that's going to come on, and it's quite interesting because from our perspective, there's a narrative that less people are looking to make that fun jump up from the AD to the DCS position for whatever reason it might be. Common reason is that it's thought to be an impossible job. It's something that I've heard often. Through my conversations, I've heard much more, through this podcast, I've heard much more sort of positive stories around it. And I wonder what your take is on that narrative. Do you have any sort of strong views about it? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a really strong positive view about the role of DCS. I think it's one of the most privileged jobs that you can do. I think being able to affect change for children and young people across your community is an absolute privilege, and I really enjoy it. I enjoy the nice bits of the job in terms of meeting with children and young people, meeting with families, meeting with foster carers, really hearing those individualised stories. But I also enjoy that kind of developing staff and helping staff to come up with those new ideas. I enjoy working with my corporate directors across the council and looking at those kind of connections across all of us that can be helpful. And I really enjoy the regional work as well and working with regional DCSs. So I would say this job is a real privilege. I think it gives you opportunities to make a difference. It gives you opportunities to support people, and it's incredibly rewarding. So for me, that doesn't mean there aren't tough days. You know, there absolutely are tough days, without a doubt. But actually, overwhelmingly, I get a real buzz out of the work I do. I get a huge amount of job satisfaction. And I would really recommend anyone who is thinking about going into kind of Director of Children's Services role to go for it and to speak to other DCSs and to get that feeling for it.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a really positive story. I didn't expect to be a DCS, but I'm really glad I am one.
Okay, that's really good to hear. Most of the people that are listening, or hopefully listening to this, are going to be, part of the Tar Heel community who are generally operational leaders, other service managers, heads of service, ADs, maybe thinking about, long term, if they want to step into that role. Is there any? What would be the one piece of advice that you'd give to someone who's considering it, or maybe on the verge of getting to that first position?
Yeah. So my first piece of advice would be get experience. So think about opportunities to get experience. If you're not used to being part of the political meetings, then go and observe a political meeting. If you're not used to being in schools forum, because that's not been your area of expertise, go and observe schools forum. Go out and meet with members of teams that you're not used to working with. Ask for those shadowing opportunities. I think they're really important to get to know services beyond your own and get to have an understanding of what their challenges are. And I think the other thing is to get a mentor. I think, get a really good mentor, get someone who's going to talk with you through that and to kind of get you excited about those opportunities.
Cool. And you mentioned succession planning in the previous answer. And I was going to ask about the mentor side of it. How do you sort of go about it? For you, did it just happen kind of naturally because you came into the role? And otherwise, if that's not how the opportunity presents itself for others, how do people go about doing that, finding a mentor if they don't naturally have one?
Yeah, so once you become a DCS, then a DCS appoint you a mentor. And I had a mentor through there who was absolutely fantastic and one of the most rewarding mentoring experiences I've ever had. And one of the things I'd say about mentoring is you get out what you put in. Okay. And my mentor was really good at saying this is a safe space, but actually you only get from it what you give. And that was really helpful for me. I think if you're not in that position yet and moving into a DCS space and you would like a mentor, I think talk to your line manager. And if that doesn't work out for you, think about other places you can go. And ADCS is a good place to start in terms of speaking to people, and I'm sure they can talk to people like yourselves about being connected with different mentors as well.
What is the most sort of interesting thing happening in your world currently?
Yeah, so actually there's quite a lot of exciting things going on at the moment. So, and it's really nice to focus on those things because I think often, we're really focused on improvement, we're focused on finances within local government, but actually there is innovation happening. So a couple of things that I'm really excited about at the moment. Really excited to be part of the Pathfinder project for the for the stable homes built on love. Right. Really exciting developments in there, and we were one of the first 3 Pathfinders, so we're quite well on in our journey around that, and I think that is starting to change the shape of our services in a really positive way. So it's bringing us even closer to our partners in health and in the police force. It's getting us really focused around that child protection and how we work together in that space to de-escalate need and to keep children safe, but with their families wherever possible. And I think that we're doing some really exciting stuff within there. That's very connected to the family networks and the work we're doing around family networks. And through the Pathfinder, we've got additional funding that is going direct to children and families in Lincolnshire. And it's really interesting testing out. So how can that money make a difference? How can us being able to fund some support really quickly, early on, make a difference to the trajectory of a child? And how can we avoid then children's needs escalating and wrap that support around families. So I think all of the work we're doing around the Pathfinder is really interesting. And it's a great opportunity because we're working with other Pathfinders across the country, and we're working with the Department for Education and the teams in there. So again, it's a place to think, to generate those ideas, to test them out, and that innovation is something that's really exciting, and it's something that I know keeps staff with us because they like to be involved in that. They like to have those opportunities. The other areas that we're really developing in terms of our sector-led improvement support, so we're a sector-led improvement partner, currently working with Nottingham City to work with them on their improvement journey, and every single authority we work with offers us a different challenge, a different perspective. We always find some nuggets of fantastic practice that we bring back to Lincolnshire and we talk about. But actually, I think there's something really honing about having to articulate how we do things and why to support another authority to think about a different way of doing things. It means we have to be analytical about what we do. We need to be able to articulate it. We need to be able to back that up with the evidence and the impact it has. And what we do within Lincolnshire is we give that support across a range of areas, so it gives different people opportunities to go into other local authorities. And as I said earlier, as a consultant in teaching and learning, going into other schools was something that was very developmental for me. And I think we find that as we go into other authorities with the sector-led improvement, that's really good. The other area for me personally that's quite exciting at the moment, so I am the National Chair of the Education Policy Committee for ADCS, and we've obviously just had a new government.
Yep.
So there's loads and loads of ideas and change, and I think it's quite an exciting time to be in a position such as the chair's role, because we're involved in early thinking, we're involved in the development of those ideas, and we're able to go back to our members and talk about this is where the thinking's at. And so I would say I'm really hopeful at the minute about some of the areas for development. Some of it's a continuation of what we were doing under the previous government, but some of it is some new ways of thinking and a different focus, really. So I think it's an exciting time to have a position as a national chair. But equally, I would say to everybody, who's involved in the ADCS, if you're not part of a committee, join a committee,
right?
Because actually it's a really great space to hear new thinking. And if you want to be a DCS, join the committee that's not in your area of expertise and expose yourself to that thinking from a different group of professionals, because that can really bring a lot of benefits.
Yeah, you spoke about having diversity in the DCS community as being quite important, and I think that's where most of the ideas would come from at the leadership level. Is that where sort of the people who work on the services develop policies, share ideas to then go back to, say, members, for example? Is that the sort of DCS's version of finding out what change needs to be made through collaboration?
Yeah, so it's a way of us testing out. So sometimes what we're doing is we're testing out, is everybody experiencing this problem?
Yeah.
Is this something we need to escalate to national government? Sometimes it's testing out what national government thinks it might do. And sometimes it's hearing about best practice in other areas. So it's very much about collaboration across local authorities. And then what happens is people take that back into their own authority, and they might decide to run with one of those policy ideas. It might be the solution they've been looking for. And then usually what you find is they'll connect with the authorities outside of those meetings. They'll go and do a visit and have a look at it in action. And then they'll work with their own members about developing a decision-making paper to move to a new approach. So it's almost a kind of way in which we can really pull and test out new policy ideas in a safe space.
And is that the Pathfinder work that you mentioned earlier as well? Are you allowed? Do you speak about that in an ongoing manner with the DCS community, or is that something that you need to get done before you take findings to them? So I'm curious as to how the progress on that is shared with the rest of the community.
So I think from a DFE perspective, they have established routes for sharing it, and so they do workshops and they invite people to be part of that. In terms of the DCS community, from my point of view, it's a very sharing community, so I would discuss that with DCSs. We did set up a group so there was representation from every region. so we could meet with them and we could explain what we were doing and what we were testing out. Because the danger of being in the first 3 pilots is you limit your thinking to those 3 local authorities. So what we very much wanted to do was to have a collective gathering of ideas rather than the 3 authorities going off in their own directions and never hearing other people's perspectives on that. Doesn't mean you have to go with other people's perspectives.
Yeah.
But I've been really grateful for the DCSs who've dedicated their time to come and meet and hear how things are going and say, well, I wouldn't do that, Heather. I wouldn't do it like that. I'd be really worried. And being able to hear some of that, I'd be really excited about doing it this way. And so that, I think, has been really helpful for me in terms of, so we definitely do share. We share a lot as DCSs, and I find it's a sector that is very giving of time and expertise and engagement, really.
Brilliant. All right. Well, to move swiftly on to the final part of the pod, which we always end with something around recruitment and retention, given who we are. So, what has worked for you in helping either recruit for a leadership team whilst in the position you're in, or to develop someone? Have there been certain strategies that you followed which have yielded particular successes?
So I think in terms of the leadership positions, I think succession planning's been really important to us. So making sure that we are early on in people's career, tapping them on the shoulder and saying, we see your potential, stick with us, we see your potential, we see where you could be going, and then trying to give them opportunities to expand their interests whilst they're not in that role, whilst that progression opportunity isn't there. And I think that's the trick. I think we have a lot of talent here, but obviously there is a limit to the number of leadership positions we have at any time. So I need to make sure, as far as possible, I'm offering enough incentives and enough opportunities to keep those people who are the succession plan around as we move forward. I think it's really important that in any new role that people get a good induction as well.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we find is we want people to really settle into new roles, and we have a real high challenge, high support ethos in Lincolnshire. So, absolutely people will be held to account, but equally I will lean in, and ADs will lean in, heads of service will lean in where they have to, and to give that support as it's needed. I think in terms of leadership strategies, if I look over our leadership roles recently, that there've been internal recruitments even when we've gone externally, and that is because I think we invest a lot of time in that succession planning and in that training and in that offer, and we have some really high quality leaders who would be able to move on in other areas and are choosing to stay and work in Lincolnshire. So that means that they're strong competition to anybody coming in. I think the other thing we do, which again I think is important, is I am open to opportunities. So currently we've got a really senior member of the team seconded out to another local authority, and that's to give her experience that she wouldn't get in Lincolnshire.
Yep.
And we can't give her that experience, and so she needs that experience, so she's seconded out. Now that's mutually beneficial to the local authority she's seconded into, and to the local authority, and to the individual herself. And it allows us to continue to develop our staff. And I think we've always kind of held true to that mantra, that question around what happens if I develop my staff and then they leave.
Yeah.
Well, what happens if you don't and they don't? So we've really kind of stuck to that. We want our staff to have the best opportunities and to have opportunities to lead in other authorities, to lead within. We have lots of secondment opportunities. Because we're doing innovation, we have opportunities to lead a piece of innovation, so people can step out of their day-to-day role to lead a piece of information and then go back into it. And that, I think, gives them the variety as well.
Yeah, it's about being multidimensional, isn't it? Because people in their career progression, want more than just going up the ranks. And I guess that happens through having a variety of experiences. So I think that approach definitely works. I think it could probably be, that approach is something that Children's Services overall needs, in my opinion, because I think every council is going through a somewhat similar situation when it comes to funding and, all those same problems. And the ability to sort of promote from within in an ideal world should always be the case. in an ideal world, when you can promote from within, just to continue on from that is always beneficial. But every now and then, I think it's a necessity to hire someone from outside and externally. What have your experiences been of doing that? Are there any success stories that you'd like to share, and what approaches have worked for you? Hiring externally?
Yeah, so absolutely. Good succession planning is really important, but also sometimes it's beneficial to bring new people in, to bring a different perspective in, to have a different energy. We've recently had a head of service come in from another local authority, and her experience in that local authority was really different. They were under a different type of pressure, and they had a different type of focus. And as a result of that, she'd already done things within her teams that we hadn't got to needing to do in Lincolnshire. And so she was able to bring that energy and that kind of drive around delivering outcomes at a faster pace. And that was really exciting for us. It was exciting for us to see her bring in that new energy to say, why are we doing things like this? Help me understand why you just set it up like that. And it was, really refreshing to have that different perspective. So I absolutely see the benefit of not, bringing in people from elsewhere, but also being connected to elsewhere. And I think that's really important. I think as you become a senior leader in children's services, that connection to other people doing similar jobs to you is really important. And being able to work with people and to hear different ways and different ideas and having that interest in, so how are you managing this, is really important as we move forward. And I think it's that recognition that if we, there is a risk, isn't there, if you just do internal succession planning and actually everyone becomes moulded in the Lincolnshire way and we all become one version of a leader. I don't think that's true, because I think people bring their own personalities to it, but I do think that's important. And I think when people are thinking of being a director of children's services, there's not one way to be a director of children's services. You need to find your way to be a director of children's services. And for a long time, I thought I had to do it the way my director had done it, because I really admired her approach. I really admired the way she worked, but actually I can't work in that way. And so I realised that I was going to have to do it my way if I was going to find it enjoyable. So it's about giving yourself permission to lead in your own style. And as long as you do that with integrity and you're authentic about that, and you're investing the time and energy, then I think you get more success in having that confidence to lead in your own way.
Amazing. I think that's a great way to close it off. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lovely. Thank you.